Welcome to our Galactic Alchemy podcast.
Whether we're exploring intuition, healing, or higher guidance, you are invited to tune in, not just with your ears, but with your heart and your energy.
I'm Anita, and I work with soul-aligned leaders, visionaries, and healers to restore energetic coherence, awaken truth, and reconnect to the intelligence of the heart.
I'm Azriena, and I do very similar work to Anita through a different modality. I also work with integrating your multidimensional selves in a process I call soul alchemy.
This podcast is a space for deep connection, for attuned conversations that clear distortion, awaken soul gifts, and return us to the frequency of who we really are.
So let's get started.
Welcome back to Galactic Alchemy. There are moments in our collective consciousness when adored public figures, leaders, teachers, or gurus, once placed on pedestals, are suddenly exposed, questioned, or destabilized. Right now, with disclosures intensifying, long-held trust begins to wobble. With the unraveling of illusions around spiritual authority figures, icons we once admired shift in our perception. It can feel like a betrayal, and we are left questioning what we think we believe. Even if we are not directly involved, something inside of us can still feel rattled. These revelations expose hidden networks and power dynamics. The intense emotions they stir, anger, grief, shock, are powerful. When fixated on negativity, they fragment our energy field, scattering our vitality. Yet, when we are able to meet them consciously, integrate and alchemize them, they become coherent fuel for our awakening. The energy stays whole and sovereign. So before we go any deeper today, shall we pause, come together, and let Anita gently guide us to drop in, to settle our systems, protect our space, and come into coherence? Over to you, Anita.
Thanks, Azriena. I am so grateful that we're here together again. And I would invite you all now to just pause and take a moment. Take a deep breath in, hold it, let it swirl through your body. And as you breathe out, really relax and let go. And bring your attention to your heart space. I want you to breathe in and bring some emerald green light into your heart space. And now send that emerald green light out as you exhale. Send it out into your field. Imagine you're surrounded in a ball of emerald green light. This is heart energy. This is stabilizing your field. Keep breathing at your own pace. I want you to walk around for a minute in your mind. Just walk around and feel that emerald green light around you. It's soft, nourishing, nurturing. Take another deep breath in and bring some golden light in. And imagine that you're breathing this beautiful golden light through your body, and it's giving you an energetic upgrade. And as you breathe out, imagine you're surrounded in a ball of golden light. Feel how luxurious it is. Deliberate, intelligent, wise energy. One more. Let's take a deep breath in and bring in magenta light into the heart space. Let that magenta light sweep through your body. And as you breathe out, imagine that you're surrounded in a ball of magenta light. This light is galactic, it's high frequency. It's intuitive. It taps you into everything that you need to know, everything you need to receive. So just sit in the energy of this magenta light for a moment. You're held in the love of the emerald light. You're tuned in with the frequency of the golden light. And now your vibration is elevated in this beautiful magenta light. In this energy, you're ready to walk out into the world, to be who you truly are, aligned, discerning, and sovereign. Take a deep breath in, breathe out, and come back into presence. Azriena, take us on the journey. Where are we going today?
I feel like you've just taken us on a journey, Anita. That was so beautiful. It really landed so gently, very comforting in my heart. Thank you so much for that. So today, we want to move gently into something that feels very alive for many of us right now. What happens when the narratives we trusted start to unravel? What happens when someone we looked up to and what they represent to us no longer feels safe in our field? What happens when idols fall? Maybe grief creeps in, confusion, a touch of defensiveness, even a sense of losing our footing. We are at a time when the collective emotional charge is running high and spreading fast. Disturbing material flashes around at lightning speed. Narratives shift in hours. Outrage spreads like wildfire. So when we stay activated for long stretches, whether that's fear, anger, or shock, our attention gets scattered. And when our attention gets scattered, our discernment usually follows suit. So let's pause here and gently turn the lens inward for a moment. What is all of this doing to our nervous system? If I got this wrong, what else have I gotten wrong? This question creeps in. And underneath that, this deeper realization surfaces. Have I handed over parts of my own inner knowing to someone else's voice, someone else's certainty, someone else's agenda? Have I been outsourcing my authority? That handing over can feel safe in the moment until it doesn't. Then the body remembers the unease, the second guessing, the faint sense of betrayal towards ourselves. This is where sovereignty begins to whisper again. You never needed to outsource your truth. Sovereignty isn't about knowing everything. It's not about letting everything hijack you. Today, we explore sovereignty as your deepest inner authority, and discernment as loving protection. We are spiritually moving into an era without gurus in the old sense. The teachers no longer hold authority over you. True guidance arises as resonance with your inner knowing. Fallen icons and inverted structures mirror this collective invitation to release external saviors and reconnect with the sovereignty that lives inside. So Anita, I'm curious, as a deeply intuitive person, what's the first thing that comes up for you when we talk about these shifts? The idols falling, the narratives unraveling. How does it land in your energy right now?
That's a great question. And I was listening to you and I so resonate with those words. And my heart instinctively always wants to go back to, how does this serve me? Why would I want to have this experience? Why is this happening on a collective level? And that makes me excited, actually, because I think it's all about our soul reclaiming his or her power, strength, sovereignty. And I think people can be overwhelmed by the word sovereignty sometimes. It feels like there's so much to do. It feels like a verb, we need to be doing more. And actually, sovereignty is this lovely, soft, gentle word that is all about you just standing up and claiming who you are, claiming your identity, knowing what your belief systems are, and then walking around in the world being you. So it can be quiet. It doesn't have to be the loud version of you. There doesn't have to be any broadcasting about these are my beliefs and this is what I need everyone to believe with me in order to be part of my community. I think we've come into a stage of discernment where we want to be around people who challenge us and who have opposing thoughts of view and opposing ideas, but in a way that's really collectively advantageous. We can all learn something from each other. We're all sharing information in a way that honors each person's individuality. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of those people that were writing all those great books in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. We're on this journey where we're discovering our spirit and our soul. These authors who wrote these books, I've read, and I often think these books are channeled, and the information lands and resonates with us because the channeling is so accurate and on point. But the channeling is still higher self and higher wisdom coming through the physical body and being expressed on paper at a time where the collective consciousness is asking for those sorts of answers and messaging. But at no point are we invited to put the authors of these books on pedestals and turn them into gurus and turn them into people who are of higher wisdom than us. The information coming through is fantastic. Their ability to be this open vessel and receive information is wonderful. But then they do have to go out into their lives and actually live and breathe the information that they're bringing through. Otherwise, there is disconnection. So sometimes we idolize these people, and the truth is we don't know them. We don't know what they're like in their life. We don't know what their children think and what their siblings think, what their community thinks. We just know what we've seen in a snapshot of them promoting a book with a great premise, and we're invested. And that's beautiful. I think that speaks to our innocence, our desire to be inspired, that part of us that wants to be creative and go on the journey. But I think we're coming into a period now where the collective consciousness is awakening. It's such a high vibration globally, and we're being invited to really become discerning about the information we're letting into our field and what we're holding at bay. And the information we're letting in, I want you to stop and think about the quality of that information, because if you're not upholding really strong boundaries and you're not checking and vetting the information that you're allowing in, you can destabilize your own nervous system. And that's when you start to feel stressed and overwhelmed and, the short attention span, and people are saying things and you're having a trauma response. A trauma response will feel so physical. You will start to tremble. You'll feel anxiety. You'll feel real distress in your body. And at that moment, I would invite you to pause. And I know we do this with each other. We'll pause for a moment, reset, go back into breath, remind ourselves that we're safe, we're calm, and that whatever we're reading, whatever we're allowing into our energetic field, is something we're observing actually. The things that we're reading often are not directly impacting us. And when we start to come back into awareness of our body and our breath and the moment and connection to the earth beneath our feet, alignment occurs. And we're back in our own physical field. And in that field, when we look around, and I've done this with clients actually, I remind them, there's no direct threat in your immediate environment. You are completely safe. There is nothing to be afraid of. In this moment, if you go out into the world and you're exposing yourself to different things, fine, you need to take precautions. But in this moment, you're completely safe. You're probably in your car, in your home, you're somewhere in the office, but you are safe. No one is here to harm you. When you uphold really strong boundaries, there is nothing to be afraid of. Everything that comes towards you, you'll be able to deal with in a very clear-minded way. But it takes practice to not extrapolate, to not get caught up in the frenzy, to not start to outsource your peace of mind. So my invitation always is, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, come back to your breath. It seems so simple, too simple for a lot of people because they're like, breath work. It works. It just does. Bring yourself back into attention of your breath, and your nervous system will begin to automatically regulate itself. Remember, the body instinctively always wants to come back into balance, always. So you don't have to do a lot of hard work to come back into balance, but attention, focus, and prioritizing your peace is the key to everything. Azriena, what do you think?
I actually would like to take this down to a personal level, and we are talking about keeping our own peace. And I feel that since I was very, very young, I am one of those who has almost like a visceral or physical reaction to inauthenticity or when something feels genuinely wrong. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else. It's just something I felt since I was young. So I'll give you one example. When I was 5 years old, I was sent to religious studies in the 80s. Teachers were more strict with the kids, especially the boys. The boys were getting whipped with a belt. But at 5 years old, I knew it was completely unnecessary. I was barely in the class for 5 minutes and I started crying, bawling my eyes out and saying, I think I want to quit. And to be fair, the teacher was gentle on me, but maybe because I was a little girl. And then there's a few other older girls in the class. They walked me home and my parents saw me and they were like, what are you doing here? You've barely left. This is like your first day of religious class. And I just said, they're beating kids up. I don't want to be there. It's scary and it's not right. Something along those lines, told through the lens of a 5-year-old. But what was great was that my parents never once made me go back there. They found another way to educate me in the way that they felt I needed to be educated at that point. But I think something like that actually built the muscle of self-trust in me. Because even as a 5-year-old, my opinion was not denied. They did not question me. They did not force me to go back in there. So I feel throughout my life, if someone is being inauthentic or their intentions is not very clear, I just sense it. From the get-go, I feel it. And it hasn't actually served me in the most gentlest of ways throughout my life. Because you know what it is, when you are the one person who senses it, and generally everyone around you is blinded by this person's charm, you do feel like you are the odd one out. I question myself sometimes, like, what is wrong with me? Am I judgy? But I know I wasn't, but it just didn't sit well. And what happened is it all comes out in the wash. It could take a few years, but then my instincts tend to always be proven right. And it's also been the same for me in the space of the spiritual wellness world. There has been some prolific gurus or teachers applauded around the world. And I probably just felt neutral about. I'm like, well, this person is so loved by millions and millions around the world. And a lot of people have come forward and said, look, his or her teachings have really, really impacted my life in such a positive way. Who am I to say what's right or wrong for anyone? It's really not my place. But I know when something or a certain kind of teaching or certain celebrity or personality doesn't resonate with me. But again, because it's not impacting me directly, I just go on with my own merry way and I just find what connects with me. So I guess with the recent revelations, in my lifetime it took about 20 years, I can say I'm not totally surprised, but I just thought, wow, is that why? I've never felt an affinity for a certain teacher's teachings, a certain personality's books. So I just thought, okay, it's just another affirmation for myself that my instinct was right, what I felt was right for me. And that was just a personal sharing. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. Perhaps it is a show of solidarity for those out there amongst our audience who pick up on these things quite instinctively, and usually we question ourselves because we don't want to be seen as a bad one or the odd one out. But yeah, there is so much power in our own inner knowing, and we should honor that. And moving on from that, Anita, if I were to zoom out to a wider lens, I also see we are definitely living in a time of ascension where the hierarchical structures are crumbling. And this applies across the board, not just to like a particular industry or foundation or structure. I visualize it as if the previous hierarchical structures were like a tower. Obviously you have the highest one at the top, and then you have the bottom's one at the bottom, and then you have your middle bit. I actually see it more like concentric circles. Like in my mind's eye, I see it like circular structures, concentric circles. So information, knowledge is spread around in a circular way with more equality. We all have something to teach each other, And it is important to always note that we will always have different gurus, different teachers, different guides at any point in our life. And when we connect with them at that point that we were working together, it's because there is a match there. And then, we move on to something else, and so do they. And other people may come to them then. And then we may find some other people or teachers we find is more inspiring for us as we go on. And then we may go back to the previous one. And it's all okay. It doesn't have to stay in the same space. And the movement and the progress doesn't have to be linear. So those are some of my initial thoughts around this.
I love that, because the first story that you told about your parents and going off to religious studies, what I really love is your parents are your authority figures. And they absolutely listened to you the first time you expressed discontent with what was going on. And I think that is one of those core muscle building moments where you learned to trust yourself and they validated how you felt, and you were quite young. And I think that really goes a long way to building strong self-esteem. And I think a lot of people out there, when they were children, they didn't get that validation. So they would have gone back time and again to these religious classes and been exposed to whatever was going on there. And what happens is it creates distrust within yourself, because you abdicate your authority to these adults in your life. You question whether you have a right to judge or to have an opinion about it that's different, because nobody's upholding that emotion that you're feeling. And as a result of that, they grow into adults who are always second guessing themselves, and maybe not all the time, but enough that it's shaping their lens and it's shaping their experience of the world around them. And it's not until they become parents themselves, perhaps, or they're in positions of authority at work, where they're then asked to pause and think about why they feel so strongly about what they do, why they keep abdicating power in certain situations, in certain meetings or engagement. And there'll be patterns to the way that they're responding, and it will be reflective of the lack of self-trust as children. One of the big comments I hear a lot is, well, who am I to judge? And I think I spent most of my life looking out through that lens of, well, who am I to judge? And that means I'm going to allow a lot of people to do things that didn't feel aligned, but I didn't feel I had a voice to question it. And then one day I did, because I thought, no one knows me better than me. So if I feel discomfort around these behaviors, or these people, then I'm the only person that can pause and say, is this right for me? I don't think I need to be here. And I think it's really safe for me to remove myself from this situation. And there's no judgment. It's factual. At that point, it's just a mismatch of frequency, vibration, ideas, beliefs, whatever you call it, it's not matching up. So I would encourage people to, whenever they feel discontent or discomfort, pause and sit in the discomfort and break it down. How old were you when you first felt this way? What was going on? Did you feel validated? Were you encouraged to trust yourself, to trust how you felt when you walked into a space, to trust the people that you're being left in the care of? All of these are really important questions, and it will take you on a journey of self-discovery. Ideally, we want to bring you back to the point where, what do you want? What feels right for you? And I would say this with respect to these gurus. Someone bought me a book probably 15, 20 years ago, and it was the #1 bestseller on that self-help list, and everybody loved the author, and I picked up the book and I couldn't get past the second or third page. And I thought, oh, I know, it comes with, I think it was a tape or a disc or something. I will listen to it instead. I put it in as soon as I heard this person's voice, and it was very soft. I thought, oh, my heart hurt. I thought, oh, I can't listen to this. At the time, I put it down to, I probably have some sort of past life experience where this is triggering something. And, if I go into the Akashic records, I can probably clear this energy. But I found that whenever I went to pick up that book or listen to that person's audio messaging, I was forcing myself to do it. I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to be more open. So I would force myself to do it. And then at some point I thought, I honestly, and I can't do this. And this, whatever this great teaching is, it looks like it's going to pass me by because I really can't put myself through this. And so I kept the book on the shelf for about 10 years. And I think it's because I kept thinking, oh, I'm sure there'll be something in there one day that's for me. And one day I was cleaning my bookcase and I just removed it. And I thought, I don't need to keep torturing myself in order to feel like I'm a better person. I can remove the book with a clear heart and move on. This person's not for me, but there's probably someone else out there with a great message that I will resonate, with more easily. So trying to fit that square peg in a round hole, like, we need to stop doing that. We need to stop thinking that just because these people are held to a certain standard doesn't mean that they have the answer to everything, and doesn't mean that that answer is right for you. If you feel the direction is not aligned with your moral compass, with your value system, with your integrity, you have every right to advocate for yourself. Azriena, tell me more about where you're landing with this conversation, because I'm really enjoying the anecdotal stories that you're sharing with us.
I've got one more in my pocket actually, and it does link back to what we've touched on in the first half of this podcast, but it's like the flip side of it. We chatted about how some of us instinctively knows when something or someone or a certain kind of information feels off, but we just didn't know how to sit with it because everyone's going the opposite direction. But I've also had personal experiences where things doesn't feel so good at the start, but then it evolves into something that became really, really important for me. So specifically, there has been, over the last few years, I would say some spiritual leaders, if I may use that word, that at first didn't feel quite right for me. Like I kind of encounter their work, usually maybe like their websites, their socials, or their meditations on YouTube. And I'm like, you know what, that feels like there's something there. And I listened to it once or twice, and I'm like, it's not feeling too right, but I'm not quite sure why. So let me play with this. I tried to leave it in a neutral space, but I just feel there's something there. I'm just not quite sure why it doesn't feel safe for me at the moment. So I explored it. So I didn't push it past a point where it doesn't feel comfortable for me. So for example, if I've listened to someone's audio meditation once and I just think, oh, I'm not quite sure about these concepts, but I feel the essence of it, the spirit of it feels good. But somehow there's a couple of layers on the surface where I feel I have to chip away at. But again, it's not forced. It's just me kind of saying, I want to get to the root of it because I feel there's something here. And you know what? Like after a certain period of time, their work started to land with me. And it's happened with about 2 or 3 teachers that I can remember. And one of them is the only spiritual women's mentor whom I've flown all the way to the Azores in Portugal at the very last minute to do a 5-day women's retreat in connection with womb healing. And when I met her in person, I told her, oh my God, I feel almost starstruck. But I have just adored her even before I met her. And I always thought that is also where it's also important to maintain a state of neutrality. Take away the charge, the emotional charge or the mental charge when sometimes we're not very sure, because it could lead you to some gems that are useful for you in other parts of your life or in other timelines of your life somewhere down the line. So that's my experience. I've had it on both sides of the coin. The ones where my inner knowing says this is off for me, there's something not right here, and it's been proven, even though maybe it took 2 decades. And then on the other hand, I've had situations where, yeah, well, you know what, not quite sure about that, but it doesn't feel like there's something malicious behind it. The energy doesn't feel like it's full of distortions or dissonance. but why is it not landing with me yet? I feel like there's some teachings here. So yeah, I went ahead with it and I learned a lot of new stuff and techniques. Maybe my field was breaking through new barriers and it hasn't created a container that's safe enough yet for me to let this new information and knowledge land. Maybe that was what it needed, just some time for calibration, integration, and getting comfortable with these new ideas. Maybe that was what it is. So, Anita, as we are exploring this together, what tools have been your allies lately for protecting your discernment and for you in staying connected to your own inner authority? And if there's one that you would like to share with our audience right now, what would it be?
I think that's a beautiful question. And one of the simplest tools, start journaling. Write down, who am I? And we talked about this last week. Self-identity, having a very clear sense of who you are, means that when people say things, it doesn't impact your sense of self. It doesn't. You become reflective and you can have a perspective about it, but you won't become sucked into the narrative. When people are speaking, they're speaking from their perspective. It doesn't have to be yours. You don't have to adopt it. You don't have to agree with them. You do have to have a strong, clear idea of who you are and what is meaningful to you. And what is it that you wanted to learn today? What is it that you wanted to take away from this experience? And when you start to do that, you're becoming stronger. You're becoming more powerful and you're becoming more sovereign. And on that note, I'm handing it back to Azriena.
So, Anita, everything you've just mentioned there, we can take it also into the environment of when we are consuming information. All the media, knowledge and information that we're being bombarded with on a daily basis, whether we are consciously seeking it out or not. When we are sitting there and we are scrolling, it suddenly becomes 2 hours of doom scrolling and the algorithms are just sending you everything around that topic. And before you know it, you are like scattered, exhausted, and just mentally discombobulated. So this is where I think everything you mentioned around self-identity, they also apply here. You know, there are healthy boundaries and healthy protocols we can set up for ourselves when we are consuming information. It is up to us to decide, what is it I want to bring into my mental environment today? How will it impact me spiritually or mentally? How will it deter me from showing up the best I can for what I should be doing for my loved ones? I feel it's very important to protect ourselves from this continuous bombardment. And if there are a couple of practical tools that maybe I can share with our listeners today, perhaps these are 3 questions you can ask yourself when you are consuming materials, especially the disclosure materials, which are very actively alive in our field right now. So maybe ponder on these 3 questions. Is this information something I can meaningfully act on? Am I engaging from grounded curiosity or from compulsion? Do I feel steadier after consuming this or more scattered?
I love these questions. I love them. I think you could take those 3 questions, save them on your phone onto notes, and when you're going out, read those 3 questions at the beginning of the evening or the event, and then reread them at the end. I think that would be an interesting practice to see where your alignment was. Where did you veer off? Where did the sensationalism within the conversation distract you and take you on a rabbit hole journey that you really didn't need to be on today? I think they're fabulous questions, Az.
So Anita, as we've anchored these practical ways to reclaim our center, I'm feeling the invitation to lift the lens a little bit. What if these disillusionments aren't just personal wounds or collective triggers? What if they're part of a much vaster galactic unfolding? Do you have any sense around that?
So I receive downloads, channeled information from spirit all the time. I always have. ever since I was a kid. And the other day, I had this narrative playing after I'd been out and talking to people. And I had a narrative that wasn't leading anywhere positive. And I paused and I asked Spirit, what was the point of the experience that I'd had today? And they shone a light on the fact that we attract to us experiences over and over until we're ready to shift the energy around it. And then Spirit asked me, are you ready to do that? So I said, yes. And I paused. I went into breath. And then I recalled the event. And I thought, what are 3 emotions that I'm feeling right now about this event? And one of them was victimization. Not mine, it was the other person. But it was that I was entertaining it. So victimization, judgment. I felt like I couldn't judge it, but I also realized that that was me abandoning my own power. And blame. There was a sense of, in the story of the victimization, this person had really talked about blaming all the characters. And I sat with the idea that this is an old, ancient energy. Because of the Akashic work I do, I felt that the energy of blame was really upheld in her bloodline, in that DNA, that lineage. And the blame, the victimization, any persecution that was underneath that was upheld in her bloodline. And then I saw a beautiful woman who looked like an elder and literally in front of me saying, would you clear this energy for me? And so through the Akashic work I do, I have a release and clearing prayer that I do. And I sort through the energy of the story as it had unfolded. And I removed blame, and I removed judgment, and I removed victimization and any persecution attached to it. And I saw it spinning like a vortex of energy. And then I called my team in and I just asked them to remove it and return it to divine source energy, where I personally envisage seeing that energy, love pouring upon it. I see it harmonized. I see it returning to pure natural source energy that can never harm another. We're not clearing energy in the Akashic records and it's disappearing. Like, energy just converts and it's transformed all the time. Everything is always transmuted into something else. So for me, having a practice where we can take a negative energy or anything that holds a low vibration, let's not even call it negative, and we can convert that through pure positive loving energy and intention into a harmonic resonant energy that can never harm another. To me, it's the ultimate act in sustainability. When you do this kind of work, the clearing work has to be impeccable. You have to uphold the highest integrity, and you do that through intention, and you do that through alignment in your heart. And it's not something that only certain people can do. We can all do this. It's just whether you feel like you want to do the work or not.
Yes, Anita, there will always be many things kicking up in the collective. It won't stop, but it's very important to know what not to give our attention to. We can practice disengaging. Not everything deserves our attention. And I think on that note, Anita, I will close this episode today. I think we have touched on something truly vast, and I hope that our audience have something to take away with them. We've remembered that sovereignty isn't something we have to go out and get. It's already inside of us. It's what we can come back to when things get wobbly. Whatever came up for you while listening, grief, anger, confusion, or maybe the quiet sense of I've got this, that's okay. It belongs to you. It's not something to push away. It's something you can meet, feel, and turn into real support for yourself. So we hope you will take whatever felt true or helpful from today, leave the rest behind, and may your own discernment kick in like a soft boundary. See you on the next episode.